Semyonova with her big dumb face.
The longest opening sequence.
It's when are all chairs bolted to the...
We're not told that.
Yeah, we do.
We're not told that.
It is written. It is written.
What's up, McCurds?
What's up? What's up,
How you doing, man?
Terrible.
Good. It's Sunday, so let's go to church and watch people die.
I did go to. I went to church this morning. Actually,
Did you eat the body? Did you drink the blood?
I did not do either of those things because I am not. I'm not Catholic. I have not been. What is the word? My wife would tell me. I wish my wife was standing right here and she'd be like,
"Is she Catholic?"
Like, oh, my wife is very much Catholic. Yes.
But you go to the same church, but not to a Catholic church?
We go to a Catholic church.
You do. So she goes up. And
I'm like,
you don't.
No, I go up too.
I remember going up because I dated a categorically Catholic girl in high school. And
I remember. Is this the one I remember?
Probably, yeah. No, she said you go up and you do this.
Yes.
And I went up and I went like this, and the priest looked at me like, What are you doing? And I was like, I don't know. I was told to walk up here and do this. Like, he's like, are you cold? What are you doing? I'm like, this is what you do, right? And then he didn't give me a cracker, and I just buggered off, basically. So,
Dawn of the Nunning, the Nunning,
Chuck
the
V.
Nunning?
Ryan. Oh, Dawn
of the Nunning.
You got to pull up the comment if you're gonna suddenly go run a miss.
Look how I know how to. No, what you? Okay, so real quick, yeah, this. So because you're not I don't want to say the word ordained. That's like a priest is ordained. Since you are not confirmed as in the Catholic, that's that would be more correct. Since you're not confirmed in the Catholic Church, you cannot receive the body, the sacrament. You cannot receive the sacrament.
Yeah, that thing I keep hearing. Remember, I stand outside of the theater.
There's a lot of
if I'm at an AMC until Nicole Kidman shuts up, or until the Regal plays that thing. Right now, all you hear is the body and the blood. The body and the
body and the blood
is The Exorcist.
We're gonna see that in 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's in 2 or 3 weeks.
I hope that's.
But
good.
anyway, so real quick, yeah. So when you go up when they're eating Jesus, receiving the sacrament, when they're doing that, which is like the big main part of the church or of mass, right? If you're not ordained, or if and they talked about this today at mass, if you have sin in your heart.
Speaking of sinning. At least Kevin is repenting right now.
I don't know why you read that comment. Literally the dumbest comment I've ever written. Ignore me. That's just like his
that
post.
Up the rest of the night.
This post is exactly like him in his show. It's like that's exactly like every single video is Kevin saying something and then and then regretting what he said.
Everything I just said.
You, I'm
dumbest thing I've ever said.
Forget what I just said. But yeah. So back to the blessing. So when you go up, if you have not confessed your sins, or if you're not been confirmed, you do this, and the priest or deacon will bless you. Depends on
which I expected him to know what it meant, but he looked at me like, "What are you
weird
doing?"
That they didn't know that. Well, maybe it's because you were like this.
Yeah, I was like,
you're supposed to be like this.
I was like, oh my God, are you okay?
Yeah,
I feel possessed.
Yeah, I get blessed all the time.
Yeah.
Every time. Every day I'm blessing it.
Cool. All right.
Every
we've
Sunday
something
get blessed.
new about the McCurdy household.
Thanks.
Anyway, I'm gonna ask you to go away. And you, Louise. Okay. Here's my take on The Nun 2. You ready, McCurdy?
Nope.
No? Okay. The Nun 2 left me none too pleased. A corny opener, but I'll never be able to make that joke again, so let's savor it. Once again, a demon entity possesses someone in order to get a thing it needs to break into the physical world or something, and yet at the same time, it is capable of affecting the physical world for things like murder, regardless of having a meat puppet do things for it, because it doesn't need the magical thing it needs to do stuff with. Thereby having it both ways at all times while withholding some basic limitation by which to hang a conducive or interesting plot. So once again, we get a cookie-cutter, snooze-inducing story with minimal character development, pocked by jump scare set pieces that admittedly are sometimes fresh, but obnoxious all the same because they're still fucking jump scares. Mostly they lead to more laughter than scares, but maybe that's a point in the movie's favor. So the heroes have to get a magical thing to stop the demon, and then they have to do... So the heroes have to get a magical thing to stop the demon, and then they do in banal... Sorry. So the heroes have to get a magical thing to stop the demon, and then they do in banal Harry Potter fashion, bringing to mind the eternal wisdom of Peter Jackson and not relying heavily upon magic to carry the dramatic fire in Lord of the Rings, because magic and storytelling is more often than not too simplistic and meaningless, and in this case lowers the dramatic majesty of Christianity to the triviality of paganistic wizardry. Which is to say that it just turns everything into just like a farce, and by the end you're like, what's the meaning of this? It's not. It just becomes just like Pope's Exorcist. It's like, in the end, it's the same thing every time. It's somebody holding the religious artifact, and then the wind picks up and everything's swirling around them and the demon, and they're like lifted off their feet, and then it's like like they all have the same ending centered around some religious artifact, and eventually I'm just doing this from like, just wake me up when it's over.
I'm trying to text my wife. 1 second.
Why?
I was trying to figure out what I'm trying to tell her.
Just have her sit next to you. We
We
need a Catholic in the room for this movie.
I need a Catholic in the room.
Yeah.
'Cause, there are Catholic things you could enlighten us on. That's the word I'm looking for.
Anyway,
That's
it's
fine.
usually
okay.
Movies like this are where I drink more heavily.
I liked this movie, not as much as you did. So,
yeah.
I
no,
like
I
know you're
mean,
saying.
what do you think of that though?
Magic. I'm saying faith.
This is my favorite. This is my favorite part of the week is when you either say, oh, that's a good quick review, or you disagree with it. Where are you?
So when I say I like this movie, because I feel like generally you go to the far reaches of Mordor at any point if the movie is just not the best. And I'm usually not at Mordor. I'm like hanging out in Gondor, just like watching Mordor, you know?
That's the majesty of the list.
What you want to be, but what you want the movie to be is like when we see like something like Oppenheimer, we're like all hanging out in a pub in Hamilton. This is the craziest analogy we've ever had to make, right?
My standards are extremely high, and that's because
and I don't
like
think
in my personal life,
incredible.
I really like watching bad movies because bad movies teach you what, how to make movies and what not to do. For your average person, for anybody watching this to glean any kind of like, oh, I should avoid that movie, which is why you watch critics talk about movies. I'm very critical because in that arena, something's either something you'd recommend or it's dog shit. Like Plane. When we covered that, you and Nans were like, well, it has a good shootout at the end. It's like, who gives a fuck? So you're saying that
I didn't.
2
I
hours
mean,
I gotta
Plane was
watch
not
this
one
movie
that I
because
was.
it has a good shootout?
Plane was one of those where I was like, I wasn't necessarily going to put it. I didn't think it was going to be that great.
Whereas something like Indiana Jones, Indiana Jones is the perfect example of what you're saying, which is like, well, it's got its shortcomings, but it's overall pretty good. And I'm like, yeah.
Here's my initial thought in ranking it is really when you start saying Pope's Exorcist, I'm like in the same.
Initially, you're gonna want
really
to
gonna
compare
just say,
it to that. Like that is we always start with the obvious comparison and we go from there. So yes, the initial is looking right at Pope's Exorcist.
I liked, and I think it's my real thing is going to be is it above, below? Like right now, I'm thinking. Well, we can go to initial rankings after I go through my things, but I'm in that ballpark. I'm not like, again, I liked this movie. I didn't hate this movie. I think there are a lot of people that'll just have a good time with it. And I think horror films, like Charlie, as far as the movies we've seen so far, and we've seen a lot of horror movies, like, and I'm like looking at our list of movies, the highest horror film that we have is Megan, but Megan kind of also dips its toes into science fiction. and a lot of the horror movies per se have kind of trickled a lot down to the bottom, which makes me wonder. It's like, do you like horror movies? But I've seen good horror movies and I've seen bad ones.
Horror movies
and
are that's my favorite genre, and that's why it's very hard to please me.
Right.
Whereas there are elements of,
I
like,
think
Infinity Pool is pretty goddamn horrific. Like, I would put that.
Infinity Pool, I would say, is a horror film. Beau Is Afraid, it would like, it's more of like a drama, but it's like
part of it is horror. There are horror elements.
Horror. So in that regard, though, I think this one is just like, I would still recommend this. Like, if we were still doing recommendations, I would still be like,
well, we just always forget.
Still,
we're always doing recommendations.
If you like the Conjuring universe, I'd say, yeah, still go see this one. I enjoyed this one.
I think,
but I also like
it for
the kind of the
Conjuring
same
universe,
reasons.
I'd say
I think I like this movie in the
one.
same. I think I like this movie just as much in the same way as, like, I thought Pope's Exorcist was fine, but I thought, like, Pope's Exorcist, I was just like kind of rolling my eyes because I felt like we've seen this thing before, and now you're just kind of like, be like, oh, I'm gonna make this movie too.
Before we move forward, so we'll leave it at that.
We'll just leave it at that. But let me.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is that Pope's Exorcist at least had an interesting and fresh primary character to carry us through. They're very similar movies,
sure,
but Russell Crowe beats the hell out of everybody in this movie. So that's where I'm at for now. Here's you. Here,
and I can actually, I can go through these slides. Oh, I can do it. Oh, I can go through the slides. Oh, I can do that. But first, we must talk about our merchandise because
new
merch. We got new merch. Charlie has been working very hard and diligently.
I've been procrastinating working on your movie by making crappy T-shirts. But I think you sit on it, but you can't take it with you, or can take it with you. I think it's like I had to buy one.
Both. There's just both in there.
Yeah, because it's
both
like,
are there,
it's funny either way.
So if you want it to say you sit on it, but you can't take it with you, can get that shirt. But if you want to say you sit on it, but you can take it with you, you can also have that shirt.
Yeah,
it's equally as dumb both ways. Both ways dumb.
There's nothing better than that like totally obscure joke.
But no heroin.
But no heroin, yeah.
No heroin.
Yeah, no heroin.
No heroin. I just think that one's great too. There is one more that we were gonna make that didn't make the cut. But we'll see. We might still be able to make that one.
Yeah.
But yeah,
the more the merrier. As many stupid. I mean, the problem was I got disheartened because I made a bunch and then they all got removed by Teespring. So I was like, and I kind of backburnered it, but I keep I tend to just in general, I tend to procrastinate work with other work, right? So like, instead of making the Skyfall episode, I'll clean my house, or like, instead of editing your movie, I'll make stupid T-shirts that nobody cares about, except like, I think like Nico bought one, which is cool.
I am gonna probably buy one of these so that when work starts popping up again and I'm on set, look at that. Because the thing is that, like, no, folding chairs in particular are very much something you find on film sets a lot, because people think of the folding chairs that the directors and those people sit on, but often than not, like for catering and for background, they'll have a bunch of these folding chairs, so you just kind of get used to how to unfold those very quickly. And like, sometimes you even tell background, you're like, hey guys, go ahead and grab your chair. We're going to go to where our on-set holding is. And so to have that shirt.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, wait, what?
And maybe like for them, it's like,
would be perfect.
Are you concerned that people are going to steal the chairs? like you said, you can sit on it today, but you can't take it home.
Can't take
it's
it
like,
with
no,
you.
it's GoldenEye.
It's a GoldenEye reference, but
the most obscure, stupid GoldenEye joke ever.
Hopefully,
no heroin is just like, is just as dumb.
Heroin. No heroin. That one,
this is the beauty of living in the world that we live in. You can have a stupid idea for a shirt, and anybody can just go make it.
Yep. Make it.
Back in the day, you had to be a T-shirt guy.
Let's get the Sister Act 5, the Curse of the Nun.
Beautiful.
All right, we got The Nun 2, directed by Michael Chavez, screenplay by Ian Goldberg and Richard Nang, and Akila Cooper, and story by Akila Cooper, based on characters created by James Wan and Gary Duberman. Moving on here. So let's just talk. Charlie, I know this is one of those, like the Marvel movies, like
God, that's
Fast and
low-res.
Furious. There's a lot of films. I'm not going to go through every single movie, like what happened in every single one.
All I want to know is what happened in the Nun one. Like, lay this out and then tell me what happened.
I will lay
in the
this
Nun
out.
one.
So I'll say, yeah, I'm not going through every single one, but just to start the franchise, it begins with Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are paranormal investigators and demonologists. You may think they were full of it. You may not think they were full of it, but their exploits were great fodder for Hollywood films, Hollywood stories. And of course, we got Amityville Horror. We also got The Haunting in Connecticut. Those were also stories that weren't in the Conjuring universe, but they have been based off of their cases, so to speak. In the main Conjuring film universe, we got The Conjuring came out in 2013, Conjuring 2 came out in 2016, and then Conjuring The Devil Made Me Do It came out in 2021. It was the most recent one before this film. And then in that first film, we got Annabelle. We were introduced to Annabelle, and in real life, that Annabelle doll was based off of a giant Raggedy Ann doll, which is kind of weird because when you think how the creepy the doll looks in the movie, and you're like, oh, it was one of those Raggedy Ann dolls.
A normal doll, yeah.
Right. And then
like very much not a human-looking doll. Just like if you haven't seen a Raggedy Ann, look it up, and it's cartoony. Raggedy Ann is more cartoony than realistic.
I should have. There's a picture of like Lorraine carrying the Annabelle doll outside, and then we got 3 films with that. We got Annabelle in 2014, which came out right after Conjuring. We got Annabelle Creation, which was 2017, which was directed by David F. Sandberg, who did Shazam and Shazam 2, which we actually thoroughly enjoyed. And then we also got Annabelle Comes Home in 2019. And then there was one standalone movie that kind of just was like, it didn't spin off of any other movie. It was called The Curse of La Llorona, or The Curse of the Weeping Woman, which is connected to a character that was Father Perez in the first Annabelle movie. So that's like the very, very loosely connected film in the series. And then finally, we've come to The Nun, which was introduced in Conjuring 2. So I will go over that so you're kind of up to speed there. So in Conjuring 2, which that movie takes place in 1977, we are introduced to the demon nun at Amityville, an Amityville Horror of all places. Basically, like, Lorraine gets some vision and she thinks Ed's going to get killed by something. And then that demon, the nun, shows up and you're like, wait, what's going on? What's this nun? In fact, the nun, it turns out the villain of the whole movie of the Conjuring 2 is the nun. And you find out his real name is Valak. It was a demon from the book, The Lesser Key of Solomon, which I guess is a real witchcraft black magic book you can look up. I was kind of like, oh, I didn't know this was a real thing, but okay, apparently it's not some just fictional thing. It was sort of like a book from the 17th century of all these different demons and stuff. So yeah, have at it. Have fun, kids. Ed and Lorraine condemn the demon and it goes back into hell. And that's the end of that movie. And then we get the spinoff film, which is The Nun, which takes place obviously before this one. Which as of now is the first in the franchise in order of events. This movie takes place in 1952. So Father Burke, who is mentioned in this film, and Sister Irene are summoned to St. Cartha's Monastery in Romania to investigate the mysterious death of 2 nuns. Though through their investigation, they learn the monastery was once built on the site of a Dark Age castle whose duke worshipped the occult, opening up a rift in the catacombs. And then the Christian knights slay the Duke, and then they end up sealing that rift. But due to the bombings during World War II, there was a crack in the seal. And there was also this use of the actual blood of Christ. And like, there's a lot more. I'm trying to cliff note it real quick.
They kind of mentioned it essentially, it was like a relic with the blood of Christ in it.
Yeah. So they had they actually had the relic of the blood of Christ. And that's what they used to vanquish the demon in that film.
I bet they were holding it up. And the demon was right in front of them, and the demon went like this, and then they started to float up, and then there was like a whirlwind around them.
No different.
It was like, go to hell, go to, and then it was like,
Right, but it's no different. I think it's literally no different than using a cross or your faith to vanquish these demons.
Yeah, but my point being that all of these movies
You,
have the
you
same
just hate
exact
that.
ending every time. Conjuring 2
Well,
ended that way. This movie ended that way. Pope's Exorcist ended that way. They all
right,
end with
but okay.
the same thing. The same thing
Well,
over
what
and
else?
over and over and over.
But it's no different for me. It's no different from Marvel movies. Honestly, I'm just like, yeah, they fight the bad
Yeah,
guy
but
and they
Marvel
use
at
their
least
powers to
change
do
it.
it.
They do the same thing over and over, but they at least tweak it a little bit. Whereas with these movies, it's the same exact thing. It's like the
Yeah,
one
because
person with the relic thing and then
it's
the
Jesus
demon
Christ.
thing.
This is Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. It lowers
'Cause he's the way and the
Christianity to
life.
nothing but like paganistic wizardry. But anyway, go
I
on. Do go on, sir.
sure.
We need
That's what you think.
we need a redheaded Catholic
need-
here tonight.
I need a redheaded Catholic to show up and give
Yeah.
me.
Did she see this movie?
No,
Oh,
of
okay.
course not. She doesn't watch. She doesn't watch horror movies unless she's with like a group of friends.
Well, because she's very
She never
Catholic.
watches.
Like
She never
religious
watches horror
people,
movies with me.
religious people
No,
really
it's
don't
not a
like to
Catholic
watch.
thing. She just
No,
doesn't.
no, and
She's watched
people
the
who
first one
believe
with
in
me.
this stuff do not like to watch movies about demons and shit.
We watched the first Conjuring together, but she has not seen any of the other films. Anyway, father and sister Irene are aided by Frenchie, the groundskeeper. His name is Maurice. During the final battle, they condemn Valak, and but it ends up possessing Frenchie, which you see in this movie. And then at the end of The Nun 1, the end of that first movie, it turns out because they had mentioned Frenchie in the very first Conjuring movie, which I didn't know that. And then I'm looking at
Wow.
researching it, and I'm like, wait, what? Okay, so this has always been tied to this.
Cool.
So in the very first Conjuring, there's a scene where they're showing to it, they're demonstrating, they're like, yeah, these are possessions, and this is a French Canadian. He was like a French Canadian man named Maurice, and he was possessed by this demon, and we had to exorcise him from this demon, and like they show footage of that exorcism and like what happens. Well, then like in the Nun movie, there's a scene at the very, very end where it's Ed and Lorraine, and they're talking to the character from the first movie, and they're showing that. I think it's like that same scene. But the thing is that in the first Conjuring movie, it was a different actor who played Maurice. So they kind of go back to change it up. Like what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know the words. I have brain fog. Anyway, I have brain fog. It's really bad, guys. They go back and retcon the actor, so they switch it with the actor that's in this movie.
Is retcon the word you were looking for?
I think that was, but that's not even that wouldn't be even the right meaning, because retconning would mean like they would have changed the canon, but that's not what they did. They just it's kind of like in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, where like they got Ian what's his face to play the Emperor, and then they went back into the later movies and swapped out that actor with the whatever actor they used for the Empire Strike Back, kind of like that. So that's what they ended up doing. So there's a scene. So basically, the sense is that Frenchie, and I guess they say Frenchie actually died because of this possession. So he may or may not be still possessed by the end of this movie. So you're like, okay,
he would have to be.
So he's cursed, essentially. He's cursed with Valak. All right, so let's just get into the people behind this particular one. The story for this film and script was written by Akilah Cooper, and if that name sounds familiar, she was the writer behind Megan, which is the very first film we watched this year. So she wrote Megan. Now, as I think we've talked about before, when you're looking at credits on scripts, if it says like a person and then an ampersand sign and then another person, that means that that's a writing duo. And then if it's it's like someone else with that group. And then it's always the first two people are the ones who did the most work on that particular script.
Ampersand
so she wrote,
is a team. AND means an additional person,
somebody else.
Yeah.
And she also did the story. So basically she probably had the story and then she wrote a script, and then these two jabronis went back and like did another draft of that script, but it was based off of her original draft. So it's not, some of what she wrote is probably still in there, but they had probably fleshed certain things out or changed things or whatever. So who knows? We'll never know, but you know what I'm saying? Like that's how that all works. And of course she did, yeah, I guess some people didn't like *Malignant*, but she did *Megan*, which we really enjoyed. She also wrote *Hellfest*, and then these two jabronis, Ian Goldberg and Richard Nang, I think is how you pronounce his name. They wrote this movie called The Autopsy of Jane Doe. I can't verify this, but I think just Ian Goldberg wrote for Fear the Walking Dead. I think he ended up becoming the showrunner for a couple seasons. And then he also was a co-creator on the TV show Krypton that's lasted 2 seasons. So those are those guys. And then the director of this is actually just as interesting. It's almost like, oh, he has only directed Conjuring movies. So he did that one-off movie that really feels like kind of like, what was it, Cloverfield, where it was like they had a script and then they just slapped the Cloverfield name on it. And now it's like, oh, it's a Cloverfield movie.
Yeah.
The Curse of La Leona. I don't speak Spanish. I kind of wish I did.
Yeah.
He directed, that was his first
La Llorona.
debut.
Yeah.
La Llorona.
Llorona. Yeah.
But he directed that movie. That was his first film. And then I guess they liked the work that he did on that film. And then he did the third Conjuring movie, which I enjoyed. I thought in some regards, I liked that one a little bit more than the second one. And that's all he's directed besides this movie. So there was a different director they had for the first Nun. But this one, they were like, okay, it sounds like it's like, you did a great job in the last 2 movies we had. Like, we're going to have you do our next Nun movie. And I think he may be directing, I could be wrong, he might be directing the 3rd Conjuring movie or the 4th Conjuring movie. So they're working on a Conjuring 4, and it would be called Last Rites. So I think that might cap off the series. They might just say, okay, we're done after this. We're not going to do any more of these movies.
Okay.
Goodbye. Good night. So there's that. Let's talk about the actors in this movie.
Jeez, she's attractive.
Teresa.
Her and her mother are just drop dead gorgeous. God bless them.
Gorgeous. So she plays Sister Irene. She's of course she was in the previous film. She also had a role in Clint Eastwood's The Mule. She was also in a movie called She's done a bunch of other stuff, but I'm just
American Horror Story is like
she did a lot of American Horror Story.
She's
like she came back
awesome
every couple seasons, but she's playing somebody different in each season, which I was like, I've never watched American Horror Story, so I don't have a gauge on the show itself.
How have you not watched American Horror Story?
I don't know.
Dude, yeah. Watch seasons 1 and 5, and probably 2. Watch 1, 2.
I've heard like and each season's it's like its own thing and everything else. I've just never watched it. So
the key to that series is that it's any season where there's a rule by which if you die, your soul lives on in that location. Those are the better seasons. Everything else is hit or miss, but generally speaking, and that is definitely seasons 1 and 5 are you die here, you live on. You're a permanent cast member now as a ghost in this place. And that's what makes that show. That is why that show works. And every time they get away from it, it's hit or miss. Some people, it's like, I hate this or I love it. But whenever they abide by that rule, everybody loves it.
Cool.
I'm just shocked.
I guess I'll check it out when I'll check it out at some point in my lifetime.
Cool.
Jonas
Bloke.
Who's in The Nun? Of course, we already talked about that. Blake. Someone say that.
Don't mess with me, Blake. Yeah.
He was in The Nun. What did I write down here? Because one of my slides just disappeared. He was in The Nun. He was also his notable work, I guess, is The Private Lesson, which I have no bearing on. He was in this Netflix show called 1899, which apparently there were a lot of people that really liked it, and then they never renewed it. So,
okay,
oops.
So that's like a Bermuda Triangle thing.
Yeah, I think so. And then the last thing, at least of note, where I'm like, oh yeah, I think most people heard of this, was Luke Besson's Valerian, which wasn't well received, but he's in that one. So,
okay,
yay. And I think he was in another Luke Besson movie at some point prior to that. So he's probably like worked with that director, Luke Besson. Luke Besson.
Luke Besson is European. He's French. Luke Besson is some like Midwestern farm boy.
He's from Kentucky.
Luke Besson. Kentucky.
I'd direct this
Okay,
movie.
so that's what I was like, how do I?
Yes.
We've seen this chick this year.
Yes.
Missing, right?
So yeah,
Missing.
you would probably recognize. Yeah. So we talked about Storm Reed earlier this year. She was in one of my favorite movies that we've seen on this list, Missing. That again, like I will still say, like, yes, it's in the middle of the list, but it's still one of my favorites of this
good
year
movie
that I really enjoyed.
That movie, that movie
Missing.
had me sitting up a lot more than this movie. Like,
it was early, and I mean, it was early in this. I mean, it was early when we were doing these, so we were like, it was like, oh, this movie's really good. So at one point in time, it was up for like number 1 of the list, but that was really early on. But still, I still think Missing's great. She also has like a really memorable, fun scene with Idris Elba in The Suicide Squad, where she plays his daughter, and that one's a lot of fun. And then she was in A Wrinkle in Time, which the other is a Disney thing. She was a child actor. She's a child actor. She's been doing a bunch of other stuff prior to this. I probably don't know every single thing she's done, but those are kind of some of the notable ones that pop up. That
she shows up in this movie to hit a dude over the head with a stick.
To do nothing.
That's all she did was she hit a dude over the head with a stick.
She did nothing. And take some kids someplace. That was in my notes, Charlie. Like I might come into this thinking like I liked this movie, but I also had things that I'm like, it's not perfect. And then we got Anna Popplewell.
Popplewell. What a cool name.
Popplewell. So she was the one where I'm like, she was the one person in this movie where I'm like, I know her. And I was like, where do I know her from? I'm like, oh, she was in the Aslan. So she played Susan. She was the older sister in that movie. She was in all 3 movies, I guess.
So I just think of Austin Powers. I get it. I have bad teeth. But she's adorable. She's absolutely adorable. Like her bad teeth makes her so damn cute.
Oh my God.
Like awful. She's so British. Like I want her to serve me tea and crumpets, and then.
But I was like, yeah, she's one of those. She just pops in. You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Narnia. Yeah. But I guess she was in the 3rd one as well. She had a cameo, but she's predominantly in the first 2 films. Yeah. The 3rd one was kind of like.
The Chronicles of Narnia deserves better. It really does. Someday, like Lord of the Rings. Don't stop talking about remaking Lord of the Rings. Let's continue to remake Chronicles of Narnia until we nail it.
I think they don't even need to remake Chronicles of Narnia necessarily. They just need to continue.
They just need to do it one time well.
Well, no, they could just continue it because they're at the 3rd book, and then there was the Silver Chair, and then basically he went back and wrote prequels and books that fit in.
There's 7 books. There's 7 books.
Right.
But someday,
unlike Lord of the Rings, unlike Lord of the Rings, where you wrote 3 books, or basically he was writing one giant story and then broke it up into 3 books.
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis wrote 4 books in a row where the story was continued. So the first book, you meet the kids. The second book, the kids return to Narnia. And then the 3rd book, 2 of the kids are too old to return, but the younger 2 and their nephew, their cousin, who's a twerp, comes along and he learns how to be a better person by the end of that one. Then there's a 4th one called The Silver Chair, which is kind of awesome. In that book, the nephew comes back. The nephew comes back with another girl, and they have another person that comes with them. They go on a journey, and they have to find Prince Caspian's son. And it's like, because the way time works and everything. Then C.S. Lewis went back, and he's like, I'm going to write 3 more books, because there's 7 books total. The first one he wrote was a prequel to the Narnia, where you learn where the White Witch came from and like how, like it was more of the creation story for Narnia. Then there was another book that comes out between The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe and Caspian that kind of explains why there's all these men, because in the Narnia they don't explain why are all these men around.
Is this in addition to the 7? Like, are you talking about
this is the order of the 7?
But what you're saying is that was the first book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then later Magician's Nephew came out, and then that became book 1?
Yes.
But it was written backwards. It was written.
Yep. It was like
was the first book Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is the first book that was written. Okay. But in the order of when the things happen, Magician's Nephew.
When you buy it now, it's in order.
Yeah, I could. Actually, hold on.
Yeah,
1 second.
So my point being that someday somebody will come along and do 1 through 7 proper, and then we can lay it to rest. Instead, people keep talking about remaking Lord of the Rings, and it's the meme of like, Lord of the Rings has no remake. Lord of the Rings needs no remake. Whereas Chronicles of Narnia needs one iteration that is rock solid. And so far, the only good one is the classic, like 1970s, 80s.
It's 1980 TV movie.
BBC.
BBC
And that's what I have. I have that same.
So this is the book series that I have. I have this book series, right? So he did
sitting over there somewhere.
So he's got these are the books. I'm missing Prince Caspian and Lion Witch of the Wardrobe because we read those. But yeah, it goes Magician's Nephew, Lion Witch of the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, and then the horse and his boy, which was kind of the explainer for why there's all these men running around in Narnia. And then you have the Voyage of the Dawn Trader, which was like in a lot of iterations the third. And then you have the Silver Chair. Then he wrote The Last Battle. That's the last one. So I know we're going on a stupid tangent talking about this, but
no, it's
like to geek out about.
I've been trying to get my nephew to. I've told him, I'm like, I will pay you. He's 9 years old. He's almost 10. I'm like, I will pay you $5 for every Narnia book you read. And he's like, I really like Dog Man and
that's
Captain
what my daughter
Underpants and Calvin and Hobbes. And when it comes to Calvin and Hobbes, I'm like, yes.
My daughter loves. No, we reread Dogman, and we've read all of the Dogman books, and so we like those too.
So that's where he's at. But I'm like, $5, dude. $5 is huge for a 9-year-old. So
all right, let's get to my last slide. Sorry, we're going on.
No, I don't want to talk about the Nun anymore. I want to just. Oh,
speaking of the Nun,
she's from Mulholland Drive. That's her.
Yeah.
What?
So Bonnie Aarons. Yeah. So Bonnie Aarons plays the Nun. She's been the Nun in all these movies so far. At one point I thought she was a dude. Like I was like, they've got some dude playing this Nun. There's no way this is a woman. Yes, it's a woman. She just has a very distinct face.
Yeah.
So she's got a very distinct look, which is very peculiar. Similar to, like, I think when we were talking about Insidious, the guy who plays the demon in Insidious, like he's done all those types of roles because he has those type of body. So there's some actors who play these just creepy roles because of their look, and they don't really have lines, so they're just there. She also, as you said,
like you got to be playing the devil.
She played the dirty hobo behind the dumpster, which is probably one of the most memorable scene of that movie. I think that's the one that everybody remembers.
The greatest jump scare of all time. Yeah.
He died.
Big fucking obnoxious noise.
Dies. And then she also had a role as the rival heir to the throne of Genovia as the Baroness Joy von Trocken. And both The Princess Diary and The Princess Diary 2 Royal Engagement. I just think that's hilarious. She's in these horror films, then she's in this Anne Hathaway Disney movie. But Chucky, that's all I really have for slides wise. Let's just talk about how much we love this movie.
It's so good. It's so deep and meaningful.
So good.
And I think my last thought on this earth when I'm on my deathbed or before a terrorist chops my head off, I'm going to be thinking about The Nun 2. And
Lily
about
loved Princess Diaries. Okay.
Why is Lily McCurdy not a member of this channel?
I know.
Why is she not sitting next to you telling us about the deep meaning, the deep Catholic meaning of
she wants to go to bed. That's
very, very beautiful film. This film is, if nothing else, this film is just beautiful.
Shut up.
And
just
deep.
Shut up.
And I know, I mean, I'm serious. It really, I came out of it transformed. I really, truly, I had my eyes were opened, and that's not a joke on Saint Lily,
Saint Lucy.
Saint Lucy, yeah,
which is a real saint.
Oh yeah,
that was another thing. I should have.
That stuff is real, but
I didn't realize. Yeah, so Lily could.
Your wife told
Lily will
you.
Clarify.
She over Marco Polo. She filled me in, and I said, Mrs. McCurdy, that is a better story than what we got here. If this was a movie that was just a biopic of Saint Lucy, I would have had a much better time, but instead it's like her eyes have power, but your DNA has power because you're related to her. Whatever.
But that's because you're a prick and you're old.
I have standards and you don't. Apparently, that's all you mean to say.
Right.
So,
okay.
but okay. Speaking of which, though, I just have to say off the bat, I was in the. So first off, in a very rare move,
you did say you missed something,
but
like,
in a
like,
very rare move, I walked in and it was me sitting in the front row as I normally do. I'm always up at the front, and everybody's in the back because they're like making out or whatever. Because it's like a dirtbag Regal, that nobody goes to.
It is the dirtbag Regal.
Yeah, totally. So, but it was a gaggle, and I mean that literally, a gaggle of high school girls. There were 10 of them or something, all in the back row, all just like giggling the whole time. They left halfway through the movie. They all got up and left, and I was like, "Take me with you, please." Like you're all smarter than me. But in the beginning, though, they were having trouble with the in the projection booth. I walked in and they were like, "Sir, are you okay with us just starting the movie?" And I was like, "Could you do that every time I'm here? Could you just start the movie with no trailers, no BS? Just start the movie."
So you don't see Body in the Blood? Body in the Blood?
It was a treat. It was a treat.
That
But
was
anyway,
like
so all these girls got up and left, and I was like, okay, that kind of indicates like this caliber of movie where even a gaggle of high school girls were like, this is boring. And saying something's boring is the typically I don't respect that level of critique. Like, it was boring, because just saying it's boring is in itself boring. But this movie actually is. Like, for me to say a movie's boring, it's pretty goddamn boring. And this movie truly is boring.
I really didn't think it was that boring, dude.
It's pretty boring. My wife's sister said this was 10 out of 10.
I wouldn't say it's a 10 out of 10, but there's a lot of times. Okay, anyway, back to reality.
This is how people are. Everything's either a 10 out of 10 or it's a 0. That's how I am with recommendations. But the beauty of the list is that that's not how we are. The list is like, the list has its gradations, but the Nun too.
I don't think it's 10 out of 10. I don't think it's 10 out of 10. It's not one of the better horror movies that I've ever seen. I like it. I like it. I liked the movie. Well, why did you like it, Ryan? Why did you like the movie?
Oh
I typically like these I generally like the paranormal investigate. It's like Ghostbusters is still one of my favorite movies of all time. So
which is why I don't like this movie.
This type of stuff. I like this stuff. I liked that the fact that, there were some stakes in this movie. People do die. I like that it's basically like, oh, hey, you're getting tasked to go stop a demon. Like, I enjoyed that aspect of the movie. And so, yeah, I can see where it's going to be somewhere next to Pope's Exorcist. And I do think that's also an execution. I also like the inventiveness of some of the, not necessarily jump scares, but of the set pieces in general. Like, I love that magazine set piece. I thought that was really creative.
I sat up
really
twice
liked how
in the
that
movie.
was done.
I sat up 2 times.
That was really well done.
The first time, okay, so the second time, yes, was the magazines, where she's like running through different alleys and suddenly she stops and there's this wall of magazines and the magazines start flipping. And what was weird, though, was that at first I was like, wow, this is new. This is really kind of cool. And it started slow and slowly built. But then it probably went on twice. The duration was like twice as long as it should have been, which is kind of a nitpick, but it was like the big jump scare of the movie. And that's what I said in my opener. It was like, there are admittedly some fresh jump scares, but that they're still jump scares. They're still bullshit. I'm never going to be a fan of, I'm a fan of jump scares being used sparingly, but whether it's this or Pope's Exorcist or whatever other just cookie cutter BS horror movie, like quote horror movies, they're not even horror movies. They're jump scare movies, right? And this is a jump scare movie where it's the same thing over and over and over. Somebody's walking down a hallway and the camera moves over here and then it moves back and you're just waiting for it. And that's the whole point. Is it's like a roller coaster. You're waiting for the drop. And that's why they're annoying, because they're categorically a guilty pleasure. You're just there waiting for a loud noise and something to jump out at you, which is good one time in an actual horror movie. using it one time. But if the whole movie is nothing but a loose plot on which to hang, the camera moves here, and then, we're going to do this magazine thing where the pages are flipping, and then it reveals the nun, and then we're going to slowly walk up to it. Then we're going to flicker. We're going to flicker a couple times. No, that's not it. Yeah. That's not it. And then, and then all at once. So yes, that's fresh within the genre of the jump scare, but at the end of the day, it's still just a bullshit fucking jump scare. That's where it's more annoying than it is entertaining. And
let me roll through. I'm just gonna roll through all the things that I didn't like about the movie because
wait. You have to let me keep talking.
That.
You have to let me keep talking. The only so it was the magazine cover, and then the other time that I sat up was the red-eyed goat. There's a scene where all the bully girls, there's your pure Sophie girl, and then there's the bully girls, like a threesome of girls.
It's like three, and they're mean girls.
The mean girls, and they take Sophie or Sophia, I think Sophia.
I don't remember.
They take Sophia into a room that has a stained glass installment where it's like it's got a red goat that clearly looks like it's supposed to be the devil. And they say at a certain time of day, the sun shines through the eyes, and it's like it's staring right at you. And you look away, the devil shows up. Yeah, they do an Indiana Jones thing. And but I sat up because I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. This is unique. It's like, because what's going to happen? And those are the only two times I sat up in the movie was that the goat devil and the magazines. Other than that, this movie really is, and I'm fully aware of how boring this assessment is. The movie's boring.
I didn't think it was boring. I had a huge packed theater, and I think a lot of people enjoyed themselves. But I even found myself laughing at things. But I think there's a little bit of that in horror films where you laugh at stuff that's not necessarily meant to be.
I laughed. I laughed a lot.
Enjoyed that.
I laughed a lot.
The funny stuff, the dumb stuff.
The very first scene where the priest gets shot up into the sky and he just sets it on fire. I was laughing my ass off. That's what I
didn't think that was funny, but I thought that was pretty cool.
There was a lot of unintentional laughter, which, as I said in my opener, it's like, is that a point in the movie's favor, or is that a bad thing that I'm laughing as the head of this boarding school is being beaten with one of those Catholic smoke things,
Sure.
I'm just
let me run through. Actually, I liked that scene, but let me run through my little gripes about this movie, because my major gripes really kind of started happening more towards the third act of the movie. That's where I felt like the movie is not as strong, because I actually liked the movie, the one that you seem to not like, but I liked all of the build up. I liked how you had this relationship going on in the school, and it was kind of like you had the outsiders, you had this teacher, you had the groundskeeper, and there's some kind of weird thing between them, and then you had this. I did think the girl and the guy and the friendship bracelet thing, I was like, seems a little creepy. I'm not 100% sure it's supposed to be a family dynamic, or it's the little girl is a little too into the game.
Well, that's what little girls do. Little girls kind of crush on the right.
But he's
apparently he's the only guy within a 10-mile radius.
Right. And I bet, but
innocent. It was very innocent crush she had.
Right. So I think okay, so let me I wrote this part. I said, I think this film has two really chunky A and B plots. And that's where it feels like there were two. And some of the other films have felt like this, but as far as the Conjuring films. But I liked the Sister Irene plot, because she, at the end, is the heroine of the whole story, and she's supposed to be the hero. But I think the B plot is just equally as compelling, because it's it's a great set piece for a horror film. Yet I don't think they utilized the nun as best as they could, because, for one, I'm thinking of it. Why don't they have the nuns running the boarding school like Blues Brothers or Sister Act, right? Because in those films, they make that distinction. And I do think that or at least the pop culture zeitgeist, there's a little bit of nuns are creepy, or people don't like nuns, especially if you went to a Catholic school at one point in time when things were being taught by very hard-nosed nuns.
They're sexy or they're creepy.
And so I just feel like that was the whole association. And even Black Narcissus, that movie even utilizes nuns in kind of a creepy, scary way. But I felt like that was I think one big gripe is I think the movie could have used you had the perfect setup. You have the nun, which you already set up in the first movie, and now it's like, why don't you just raise the stakes of the last one? It's no longer an empty monastery where this nun is killing all these other nuns. It's a school full of children run by nuns. And so now you have that possibility of like, oh, the kids think that the nun that they see is one of their nuns, but it turns out it's Valak. It's the demon nun, and the demon nun kills one of the kids. Like,
having not seen the first nun, having coming into this not knowing anything, I remember sitting there being like, maybe this would have benefited by only being in that boarding school and kind of revealing stuff to us, and then later let our previous nun, Farmiga, Miss Farmiga, Farmiga, have her show up, right? And maybe it's like, maybe this is like the Maurice story for a while, and then have her show up later. But
her story kind of reminds me of like, her story reminds me a lot of like Aliens too, where it's like we have Ripley who's like, no, why did you do that? Like, had the movie been like, they could have done this instead of having Frenchie going off and like causing all these issues and basically being the reason why all these happenings happen. They could have been like, oh, well, we ended up putting a boarding school at that monastery that you stopped. And then it's like, then bad stuff starts happening there. They could have done something like that. Not that I think that would have been better, but generally I'm like, yeah, it does feel like they're trying to balance these two plot lines. Speaking of those two plot lines, Storm Reed's character is just, like you said, we made that joke. It's like, she's just there to knock somebody over the head and maybe take some girls to safety. And that's all she does. And I feel like that's where the third act kind of falls apart, is because now you get to a point in the movie where there's too many characters to have anything to do. Like, they had a purpose early in the movie, whereas like Sister Irene needed to have like a companion or a sidekick. And that's really all she is there. It's just somebody to converse with. Like, she doesn't really do anything other than to like make sure that Sister Irene's okay. And then when you get to the end, it's like, okay, well, what are we doing with this character? And then what are we doing with Susan from Narnia? Like, what is she going to do? So, and then at one point, it's like they swap, where it was like sister from the girl from Narnia ends up like having to just take the kids, when that's what Storm Reed was doing like 2 minutes ago. So it's just, that's where it gets really kind of clunky. So, and then I felt like her arc was like I liked her arc, because it did personally for me. I was like, because I know you're like saying like, oh, this is like magic.
Whose arc?
Storm Reed. It's
so
very
her,
it's barely
her arc was like, I don't believe, and then I do
she's very
believe.
cynical. She's very cynical about like, and I understand this from like going to Catholic mass.
I would use
like
arc lightly.
When you go,
very light arc.
I did say
it's like one scene
light arc,
and then another scene.
Right. So she,
my faith is shaky. And then, my faith is strong.
There's like one scene when they introduce her, and she's like this. They introduce her as this nun who's like smoking a cigarette. Really is kind of like a really weird sight.
She's a rebel nun
smoking, right? But like, she's supposed to be. So she's like, I don't really. I think she has a cynicism to the idea of the Holy Sacrament that you have at Mass, where that becomes like because
like a lot of people,
Charlie, and that's where I feel like
magic words, and all of a sudden the blood turns to Jesus. The wine turns to Jesus.
Yeah, and that's where I think that you and I are different on this movie, is that it's like, it's in some regards where you're just saying like, oh, it's magic. I'm like, yeah, in the scope of story or writing a thing, it's magic. But someone who's Catholic or like goes to Catholic school or church, it's like, I see why it's like, it's not, I wouldn't say it's magic. I would call it faith. I would call it belief in God or Jesus or whatever.
No, and I'm good with those.
That's where I'm like, I don't see it.
This takes Christianity and Catholicism and turns it into a Marvel movie, which is stupid. As opposed to,
but that's what Pope's. I mean, I think that's the same with Pope's. I mean, we said that's
that's the same with Pope's Exorcist. Is that it turns into fucking Harry Potter, and that's where I'm just like, that's it. It takes the majesty for anybody who actually understands Christianity, because whatever atheists out there will be like, oh, it's all BS, man. It's all made up bullshit, man. Yeah, you're stupid. Or at least you and I should sit down and talk about how you're just kind of naive. But this is a naive take on religion, where religion is just magic. And that's where it's like,
true, but like,
turns
I think
it into a stupid action schlock.
Right, but
like,
it's the same thing.
Again,
it's
turn
like,
on the fans, and it's hold up the
I
holy
know,
relic.
but you're gonna go on that. You're gonna
Go
on
to
that
hell,
thing,
demon.
but to me, it's all like it's
You
the
know,
same though
it's
to me, where
meaningless.
it's like it's okay. It's the same to me when you complain about like the movies that are based off of real stories, and I'm like, that never happened. You're like, I want to be lied to, and I'm like, I want my Catholics in my movies who are fighting demons to like shoot rays of lights at demons and use the
I want that
power
in
of God. That's what I want. So
Constantine. I want that in Constantine. I don't want that in The Nun. You know, The Nun.
I wanted
Like
it.
you keep saying,
That's what I
it
wanted.
becomes a Marvel movie. It's stupid. Why is it that The Conjuring works and a movie like this doesn't work? And I would say maybe having not seen Conjuring in a while, it's
They
probably
still do the
because it's
same
anchored
thing.
with a
They
family.
do
I
this
care more about the family. Whereas with
right.
this, there really isn't. There aren't any characters that I'm really latched onto, and that's where it just becomes like whatever. Somebody dies.
Well,
I don't
I think
care,
one,
you know,
if they had started killing off the little girls, which I thought they were going to at one point, and then
which
they
would have
end up
been
not.
dope.
If they killed off the mean girls or done something like that, then
Yeah.
you're actually like a sense of awareness of like
There's
you're really
stakes
afraid
here.
for this one
Yeah.
one girl getting killed. So yeah, back to things I didn't like about the movie, because obviously you really didn't like the movie. I'm saying I enjoyed the movie. I had fun at the movies going to see this. I feel like this is the kind of movie that you could take a date to, or just take a group of friends and see a movie, and I think you'd still have a good time. Other thing I didn't like the goat. I thought the goat was the stupidest thing in this movie. When that goat showed up,
the goat was like, it was so
the
stupid,
goat
but it was
looked
at
so
least
dumb.
something that was like, I agree that it was dumb, but it was at least something where I was like, okay, this is different. That the goat actually showed up.
So the closest thing I can
it was
think of
stupid, though.
that ties it. So in Conjuring 2, the main villain is the same. It's the nun, but you don't know that until the very end of the movie.
Doesn't she
They
come
don't
out of a
reveal that.
painting?
Yeah. So in the Nun 2, they keep thinking they're investigating this house, and they think it's a poltergeist, and they think it's the ghost of the previous owner, but then they reveal like it's actually the nun. It's Valak who's like using it as much like dressing up like a nun. They're using this ghost as a mask, essentially, to make you think it's this, but it's actually this thing. And so they end up defeating the nun and all that stuff. And the second one, in that same movie, though, they had this character called the Crooked Man, who was another kind of apparition that was like this creepy thing that happened. And originally they were going to do a spin-off of that. So it was almost like every new movie there'd be a spin-off villain of some kind that they would do. They were going to do the Crooked Man, and they ended up not doing that. So when I saw this, I was like, okay, I see, like the goat's kind of that. But like the way the goat, like just like simple, like it for a movie that comes out in 2023. And I get it. Some people are like very apprehensive towards CGI these days. They're like, oh, CGI, it's ruined movies. But there's a reason why CGI became so popular, is because you can make things look a little more realistic, and you can really drop that suspension of disbelief a little bit more. Whereas like, it's a dude in a suit who just probably has long arms and long legs, and they were like and you can tell, like, that's the problem. It's like right when that goat shows up in the thing, I'm like, it's a dude in a suit. Like, it looks like a dude in a suit. It doesn't look that great. So that was one of my big gripes. I was just like, this goat is kind of dumb, and they just use it for the third act. And then at one point in the movie, it's just like everybody is running around. Like, literally, the end of the movie is just people running around, like almost like a Scooby-Doo cartoon, where like Susan from Narnia's got the girls and they're running from the goat. And then at one point it's Sophie running from Maurice, who's possessed. And that's when I'm like, okay, this is
again,
not
for me,
it's losing it.
For
like
me,
the movie loses it at that point.
For me to repeat my talking points from different horror movies we've had this year,
Mm-hmm.
it is just random. It's just random crap. And that's where
I don't understand your argument when you say it's random.
The dummies are just like, this is scary stuff. It is random because now there's.
I don't understand.
Like, okay.
Understand
you have a demonic
random.
force.
Like, I really don't get it.
You have a. Let me explain it then. You have a demonic force that has should have some kind of limiting principle, right? Something that we can kind of understand. This is, as I always say, there should be rules. Now, it's not like every movie needs to have rules, but there should be something that kind of limits the powers of, it's like, if this thing happens, if this I'll keep it I'll keep it restricted to this movie. So in the last movie, I don't know what happened. There was like a nun demon, and it made its way into Maurice. Well, this movie should start with Maurice, and it should just be Maurice being the meat puppet of Valak, right? And everything that Valak does is specifically by way of Maurice. But we continue to see that Valak can do whatever Valak wants with no limitation. It doesn't need Maurice to do anything. It can also just like kill people at random. It can at some point it kills the boarding school, I'll say principal.
Okay. When you say that, okay, hold on, back up. When you say that though, I get that you think it's random. I think the movie has an answer to that problem that you're saying, because at any point in time, okay, so here's the thing. He might go from place to place, and I think that it's think of it more like a tether. Like the Valak is tethered to Maurice, but it's not that Maurice doesn't have to do these things because it's not like a typical possession where it's like, they're doing weird walking on walls type thing, right? Hold on. Let me explain. No. Hold on. Let me explain. But every scene where the demon comes out, you see Maurice is having these weird convulsions, like he's paused, like he's not functioning anymore. And now that the demon's out, and it's because you see that even early on when that little girl walks in with like the milk or whatever, the food, and she's like, hello, is anybody here? No one's here. And the only thing she sees is Maurice, and he's like doing this, and then that's when the demon comes out. That's where I feel like
that worked. But I'm talking about every scene after that. There's even one where the boarding school principal finds Maurice trying to get into that padlocked room, and then he's like, oh, he wakes up, he's like, oh, sorry, and he leaves. And then she goes into the room, and she's haunted by like an altar boy ghost, and then ultimately Valak.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, again, that's valid. Again,
that's what I mean by random.
That is all Valak. That's not random. I don't think
that's what I mean by random. Where it's like it's like, is Valak truly tethered to Maurice?
I think in that
Valak,
scene,
regardless of possessing Maurice, Valak can do whatever Valak wants, and it's just random and arbitrary. At the end of the day. I don't think
it's random, and I don't think it's arbitrary. I think there's like a little bit of tied truth to all of that.
Then
and
explain it to me.
I will, but you keep like every time I try to explain these movies, you go like, it's all random. There's nothing.
Go ahead.
There's nothing real to this movie. Okay,
you have the floor.
I think what it is that the movie. So again, I think there's a tether thing going on with Maurice. I don't think Maurice is aware that he's still possessed by Valak. He just is having these weird convulsions. He doesn't realize that Valak is doing all these things. In terms of that scene with the principal, or whatever you want to call her, the head woman or whatever, when she goes to that, if you remember early in the movie, you find out that like he's the one who finds out that information. He finds out about somebody says something. I think Sophie says something to him that says something like, oh, she lost her son in the bombings in that tower. That's why she blocked it off. And he tells Valak that this information. So when he's doing his weird convulsions, it's almost like Valak is pulling the mother or whatever to that location so that she can unlock it, because he needs to get in there. Valak needs to be able to get in there. And so when she unlocks it, and she's walking around and she's trying to figure out all this stuff. How do you lure somebody who's had this tragic loss? You use the face of your child, the thing that you lost the most. That's why when she sees her son, she's like, my son, like she's trying to find her son, not realizing that it's actually a demon. That's something also that was in the Conjuring 2 that I think that kind of harpens back to that, is that they're using Valak as a demon is using using something else to make you think, oh, it's this ghost of this person, but really it's not. It's kind of like that. Their superpower essentially is that they can make you think whatever you want. I think this is also like one of those deep conversation things that you will talk to people who believe in demons and believe in a lot of like these horrible things, like to the point where they're like almost in regards to these films will tell you that like, that's why you don't talk to the dead, because you might not be talking to your loved one. You could be talking to a demon who's trying to trick you. And I think that's what that is all doing. So to me, that scene wasn't random. I just think that is like, that was that set piece of Valak's trying to get these eyes. And I know you're saying like, oh, it's the whole movie's random. I got all these points. I was just like, okay, I see where this is going.
Why can't Maurice, as the meat puppet, just break the chain and go in there and find these eyes?
Well, I don't think Maurice knew. Yeah, but I don't think Maurice. Okay, so I also don't think the demon's like omniscient and knows all these little pieces. I don't think the demon, from what I'm gathering as I watch the movie, is I think the demon still needs to investigate itself and figure out where this thing is. So if you remember the movie, there's no point in the movie where Maurice figures out like this whole thing with the eye. The little girls know it, and Sophie gives that information to Sister Irene. That's how they figure it out. But like he never figures that out. So she probably has a sense that she knows it's probably in this room, but sorry, it's Valak, but doesn't know how to get to it. And then the people that do get to it are the Sister Irene, and they're the ones that are able to get the piece. I feel like there's a lot of movies that will do that trope though, of like there is a MacGuffin and the villain also needs the MacGuffin, but they need the MacGuffin to stop the villain. And so they're both kind of after it, but then the villain usually will let the hero get that MacGuffin because then he'll just obtain the MacGuffin or whatever it is. Like it's Indiana Jones stuff, because even in Indiana Jones, it's like the very beginning of Indiana Jones. It's like they're in, he goes to the temple and then he goes in and he's got somebody he got somebody with him. He goes through all the traps. He does all the amazing stuff. He's able to come out and he gets the little idol. But then sure enough, the smarter of the two guys like comes out and he's like just takes it from him, and he has an army of dudes, and like that's kind of where I'm coming at, is where I think that's what the thinking of the Valak stuff is. So I do understand where you're like, it just feels like a bunch of random stuff. I agree with you when it comes to the third act, because I feel like the goat coming out and then they're just running around. Like it does get really silly towards the third act of the movie. But by that point, I'm like, okay, I want to figure out how they get out of this. And I think like there's enough setup there where I'm like, okay, I see where all these pieces are going. The other thing we were talking about with St. Lucy and her eyes and all that stuff, they make a heavy mention of like St. Lucy's loved ones like fled Europe or fled wherever they were at. So they were all separated. And there's some, like, I get what you're saying. It's like magic, or there's some kind of thing with that family. I think some people would read into it and say that like Lorraine Warren actually is a descendant of St. Lucy. We'll see if the next movie, if they're like, yeah, she's actually a descendant of St. Lucy as well as Sister Irene.
So that's
I wonder if that might be a thing. It's not confirmed yet. Some people are saying like there's a possibility there, only because it's because St. Lucy is the patron saint of the blind. But I think that in the Conjuring, and again, it's the Conjuring. There was another movie that was like this, where we were like, there's something that's based in the real world, but they have their own pitch or skew on it. And they did it in this movie, but this one, it was like, yeah, St. Lucy's a real patron. She lost her eyes, or her eyes were burned or something, and she didn't burn. Again, this is where my wife is like, Lily, chime in. Tell us the true story of St. Lucy. She's probably asleep by now.
A better story than this. Because
here's
where I'm at, though. Where I'm at is horror movies are my favorite genre, which means I'm very desensitized to stuff like this, which is more or less just a vague plot to hang jump scares on, because it's just a one-trick pony of just like an excuse to have another jump scare set piece. The horror genre, simultaneously very easy to make and incredibly difficult to master, right? So you have all these movies that are
depending on what kind of movie you're going for, and
whereas
I think with this one it's going for
there's guilty pleasure of
guilty pleasure, but I think this one's
like a
supposed
roller
to
coaster.
going blockbuster
wait for
Marvel
the drop.
movie.
Yeah,
this is like the Marvel movie version of a horror movie. That's really where I think.
Have you ever been to, I believe it's Universal Studios, right? You've been, right?
Yeah, they have the Horror Nights or whatever.
No. They what? I'm gonna draw a little analogy here. They have a bunch of rides that they're like, I think they like project screens, so it's like the Simpsons experience, the Spider-Man experience, and it's all the same thing. You're on like a little moving car, but they project stuff around you. And
It's like the
so,
Back to the Future ride.
yeah,
Simpsons
and
ride.
so they have all these rides, and they're all themed. And so it's like the Simpsons one where, and like at some point they shoot air at you, and then there's fire, and then there's like water. Yeah, do you know what I'm talking about? They have all these rides,
Yes, they're 4D rides.
essentially the exact same ride, but just themed different. And by theme, I mean the Spider-Man, the Simpsons, the whatever. You know,
You're just saying that this
they're
movie
the
is,
same
you're saying that
thing
this is like that.
over and over and over, but just with a new. So this one is the Nun. So it's like the Nun
Right.
experience, and there's the fire, and there's the water, and there's the gust of
Sure.
air. But it is just a loose plot on which to hang a bunch of jump scare set pieces. And for me, the jump scare is a tool that should be used sparingly. But you have all these movies where it is a one-trick pony movie where it's like 6 or 7 jump scares, and it's like, isn't that entertaining? No, it sucks. For me, a true horror movie are those like something like Infinity Pool, where you walk out of it, and like I typically see movies during the day. I walk out of it into the light, and I'm like, oh my God, like the real world is out here. Oh wow, like walking out of Beau Is Afraid. My head was spinning. Infinity Pool, my head was spinning. It's like, wow. I walk out of a movie like this and I just feel nothing, because it is like a roller coaster. It's like, oh, that was cool. I went up and down and around, but I didn't get anything from it. And that's where that is why I continue to go back to it. Is just random. It's like like comparing this to something like Evil Dead Rise. Evil Dead Rise, all of the evil is in your face. It is like constant blood and just like people just doing like there's this like scenes of people just like cutting their face off or whatever, just doing awful things. All of the evil is right there in front of you. With a movie like this is where the evil is hidden in the shadows, and it's like people walking through dark hallways and then turning the corner, and then red herring, and then turn the other one, and then wait, and then stretch it, and then stretch it, and then stretch it, and then there it is. There's a jump scare, and then you go and you're tensed up and you're waiting for it, and you kind of want to plug your ears because it's just going to be a loud noise, and then that's where it is. This is another roller coaster ride. Evil Dead Rise is the same roller coaster ride, but it's there aren't jump scares so much as it's just the spectacle of blood and guts in your face, as opposed to anything with meaning or atmosphere. And that is why I judge movies like this so harshly, because they are it's a guilty pleasure plea, right? Like if you like, I know Kevra is like all about jump scares. I think jump scares are a tool, but if your whole movie is based on jump scares, then you don't have a movie. You just have a roller coaster ride.
I don't think that makes
anything
bad
with
movie,
meaning.
Though. I don't think that makes it a bad movie, like completely the worst movie. It
makes it meaningless.
And I think
without meaning.
No, but I think that we're in the meaningless category right now. We that's fine. I get it. But like, I do think when it comes to the list, let's just put up the list real quick. So when it comes to the list, I think you and I are in the same ballpark. I do agree with you as in like, it's somewhere below, like I would put it below Equalizer 3. I enjoyed it a little bit more than Equalizer 3 because I think Equalizer 3 was just as equally boring. Blue Beetle in itself, I think this movie is a much better made movie than Blue Beetle, though, because I do think Blue Beetle is kind of all over the place. While you say this movie's random, that movie's a mess on a whole other. It's almost like the way in it's made, it's a mess, and also I think the villain's not really great. I think with this movie, it's like, because there is a part of me that's like, I think it's a better made movie overall than Blue Beetle, but it's not like I'm not hearing your points as far as like, yeah, it's a jump scare movie. And I'm like, that doesn't necessarily for me mean it's like the worst movie. And I had a different experience. I think it was a different experience because I had a packed theater of people that were really wanting to see this movie and they enjoyed it. And I wasn't having a good time.
By the end, I was the only person that was alone.
You went to the theater and your just grouchiness took over and you're like, ah. And so by the end of the movie, you're like really hating the movie. Whereas me, I was like I was kind of on the edge of my seat, like, okay, where's this going? How are they going to stop the demon? I was interested in like the whole St. Lucie and getting the eyes and figuring out what that
the relic, and they're gonna hold
and
the
I like
relic
that
up,
stuff.
and then there's gonna be a beam of light, and
it's
then there's gonna be
schlocky.
wind, and then they're gonna be lifted
It's
up off
schlocky,
their
but I
feet,
like that stuff.
and then it's gonna be I banish you to hell, demon, go to hell, and the demon.
But I also like the reveal. I like the reveal that Saint. I like the reveal that Saint Irene was actually.
They wake up in the dirt and the dust, and they go, "What happened?" And it's like, is the demon gone? And then at the end, there's one final jump scare of which actually didn't happen. There actually wasn't a final jump scare.
There was no the one thing I didn't. The other thing about it was like typically with these movies, you're gonna think there's gonna be some kind of tie to the next movie, like a really strong Marvel.
Was there a post-credit scene? Did they do
post-credit
scenes?
They did a post-credit scene, but it was kind of a weak one. It was literally just so the end of it is like they had the credits. So it was a mid-credits one. It wasn't an end credits. And then Ed and Lorraine get a phone call, and then they're like,
they brought the Warrens into it.
Patrick Wilson and what's her face came back to do like a little cameo.
Cool.
But they're teasing that, but it was like the weakest thing because there's not really. It's literally just them picking up the phone and be like, "Yeah, we'll be there." Like almost like, "Hey, you called the Ghostbusters, we'll be there," and you're like, "Okay, like,
yeah,
all right." So there's another Conjuring movie. Okay, cool. So that it's just there to tease, like we're doing another Conjuring. It'll probably be the final one. That was it. But yeah, back to the list. Because I can see you being like,
let me give you my lowest.
Where's your lowest?
My bottom, if you want to touch my bottom, is I'm at below the last voyage of the Demeter above Plane.
Yeah, I think
which is pretty low.
It's pretty low. I think my highest would be above Blue Beetle, but I don't think it's last voyage of the Demeter low. But I could see why you would put that because there's like Insidious, The Red Door, The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Like you got two horror films. You got three horror films kind of all tying into the same level. Yeah. I just think this movie.
First, you want to compare it to Pope's Exorcist. That's where the brain goes right away. Compare it to Pope's Exorcist. Then I go, but like Pope's Exorcist had Russell Crowe's character. Magic Mike is its own thing. Rise of the Beast is something. I eventually get to Insidious, The Red Door, and I go, Insidious kind of has this advantage over it, where Insidious is about like actively going in. Insidious somewhat has rules where it's like you enter this spirit realm. But
I don't want to hang a movie on this rule thing. Like I don't think that's.
But the rule thing is.
Like, I would not. No. I would not hang a movie on rules. Like you got to look at everything.
You need a limiting factor. Otherwise, everything just feels like it's random. That's my problem. Like you said, you hate the goat.
Thought process on that is the goat is random. Is the most random thing in this movie.
Exactly. Like
that is the one thing. The goat is to me. Is the one thing in the movie where I feel like that was the weakest thing that I. But
let me lay it out. The goat, random. Why? Because it's Valak as a goat, and then you have Valak as a nun, and then you have Valak as Maurice. So it's like, what the fuck can Valak not do?
Again,
why can't Valak just stop everybody's heart so everybody dies? And then Valak just gets the eyes of the nun, Lucy.
Again, I think
like, what is stopping Valak from just doing whatever Valak wants to do at all times? That's what I mean.
He's not driving around just flying from one spot to the other, and I don't think he could kill Irene in that one scene. So I don't really. Again, and I think the other part of it is
but Conjuring.
Here's the thing.
About Conjuring. Conjuring says what I love, why I worship Conjuring is because you watch enough haunted house movies and you just go, God, I just like you watch like 10 of them in a day and you're like, God, everything's the same. It's like the candle gets blown out, the wind shuts the door, blah, blah, blah. The like footprints or like hearing footsteps or whatever. What is the purpose of all this? And it's like, yes, it would be scary in real life, but what's happening in this movie? Conjuring has a scene that I love where it's like, okay, here the Warrens, they're giving a lecture and they're like, this is what demons do. Demons there's 3 phases, and it's whatever the 3 phases are. They're like, at first it's just trying to like scare you, and then it's trying to like really freak you out, and then it's lowering your immune system. And as your immune system is lowered because you're constantly in a state of fear, eventually possession takes place, or that's stage 3. Possession takes place. That's why it literally lays out what's happening in the movie, which is the candles blow out, the door shuts because of, mysterious forces. Oh, it's because this demon is trying to weaken you, essentially make you sick so it can possess your body. It's providing some kind of context, which makes the actual plot more interesting and meaningful rather than just like this trite stuff that you see over and over and over. And that's where once Valak is doing 3 things at once. Valak is a goat, Valak is a nun, and Valak is Maurice. And you're like, then like, what can't Valak do? What is the limiting principle for Valak?
Isn't that by that time in the movie where he has possession of the eyes?
No, because Valak, that all occurred all at once, where the ending is that Valak as Maurice pretends to die so that they're like, oh, poor Maurice, and then that was a misdirection to get a hold of the eyes, and then Valak happened to have possessed a tall guy, and all he did was like hold the eyes really high up so that the short little nuns couldn't reach it, and then use the eyes to like become. And that's the thing. What was the point?
You didn't watch the part of the movie, so really quick. This is where I'm like, you're wrong about the randomness, because they had already set this up earlier in the film. They said Valak needed to get the eyes because Valak used to be an angel. So because Valak used to be an angel, he's trying to get the eyes to basically become more powerful so he can do more things. So to me, I'm just like, who cares?
To do what? What did he need the eyes to do?
You need to know that. Like, we're going to go down this route of like, I need to know this and it needs to have this.
No,
like me, what? I'm like, it seems like.
What? Okay. So like Lord of the Rings, right? Lord of the Rings. Sauron needs to get the one ring back, the Horcrux, to bring Harry Potter back into it again.
Yes.
So that he can essentially be reunited with his own like essential power, right? To take over the world again.
So what's the problem here? What is the problem here? Is that
the problem here is that the problem here is that there was never a weakened state of Valak. Valak was able to be super powerful both before and after having the eyes. So what the fuck is the point of the eyes? That's what I mean. That's where it's like,
I don't think he was super powerful though. I think like
Valak was able to kill people regardless. Like Valak could do whatever Valak wanted to do.
Yeah, but
what did the eyes enable Valak to do?
That's to me is like the equivalent of being like, yeah, he could still kill people. He had a gun, but he could also still kill people more because he had a bomb. Like that's
no. We're talking about a demon that was supposedly.
I'm using an analogy as how you're. Yeah, I'm using an analogy
after the last movie. Valak was supposed to have been weakened, but there wasn't anything Valak couldn't do from the ending of Nun 1 to the beginning of Nun 2, even though I didn't see Nun 1. But there was nothing that it couldn't do.
So
as opposed to if it was
just Maurice, I think
if Maurice had been, if all of Valak was just tied up in Maurice, it would have made sense. But it was all the same. It was like this nun thing kept attacking people, even though I'm saying you need a limiting principle. So it's like once Valak gets the eyes, it's got to be like,
the reason why the movie doesn't work for you.
Oh my god,
that's what I think silly.
That's what I'm saying. It's you need something so that once Valak gets the eyes, I'm like, oh no, Valak has the eyes. Now it can do bad things. But it didn't change what it was capable of doing. So I'm like, okay, like this is what I mean. It's random. It's just a poor excuse to have a series of jump scares. That's it. That's what this movie is. Ah! Did it scare you? Oh wait, McCurdy.
Yeah, I.
Ah! Gotcha. And why is it that every jump scare has to be? It can never just be creepy. Like, remember that moment where Sophia opened that door and she revealed a hallway where the creepy nun was standing at the end of it? Like, that was creepy. But it can never just be creepy. It has to be that thing has to inevitably rush at the screen to just scare high school girls, and they go, "Oh my god, I was so scared." And then that's that. Like, there's, or even the moment where early on there was a scene where Maurice came to nun Farmiga girl in a dream, and he says something like, "Save me, save my soul." And then all of a sudden he goes, "Ah!" and his teeth turned into like demon teeth, and he's like screaming at her. And I'm like, this is what I mean. This is what makes these movies cheap and just easily thrown away, is that you can't ever have a classy moment. Everything has to end with something rushing at the screen and screaming, because this is a roller coaster. This is a meaningless roller coaster.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good story.
Cheap bullshit thread on which to hang jump scares and meaninglessness. Like, what was I supposed to get out of this movie other than loud noises?
Like, you're asking me that question?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know why. I mean, you can tell me, you know everything. You know the reason why the movie's good or bad. So I'm just like, all right, you tell me.
No, tell me. What was the
underlying? You're like, you're putting it under as like, oh, cheap jump scares equals bad movie. I'm like, I'm sitting here just like, that's what this movie's intended to be, is a cheap jump scare movie. So just like,
that's an awful motivation to make a movie. You're going to make a movie. You're going to mobilize millions of dollars.
People want jump scares in their movies.
Stupid assholes want.
People want that. There are a lot of stupid assholes in this world. Some people want that.
Yeah, and as film critics, our standards would ideally be far above.
That's why we're arguing about movies on the bottom of the list. We're not arguing about movies at the top of the list, because
so that's where
at the end of the day, at least we're like, that's why we're like that.
Because this, like, Insidious had its own share of jump scares, of course, but it had at least more of a story going on than like, oh, there's a nun thing.
You didn't think there was a story going on with like the girl and like the boarding school, or like the fact that like Irene has to go and kind of investigate and figure out where the demon's at? You didn't think that was a story?
Is Irene, is that the main chick?
That's the sister Irene, yes.
Okay.
Like, that's where I'm like, you say these things, you're like, there was no story here, there was no plot here, and I'm like, but what
was I supposed to get out of this movie? Insidious at least has this like father-son story going on, right?
I'll give you that. That's the one. Okay, here's the thing. That's the one thing I'll give you, is like, it, between those two movies, it has that. So if you want to put it below Insidious, The Red Door, I would be fine with that. I'm just like, fine, just put it there. I enjoyed the, like, that's what's frustrating about this list, is like, there are movies on this list where I enjoyed it a lot more than you did, like Cocaine Bear, and you're like, this is the worst movie, and I'm like, yeah, but you're taking the whole X factor of movies out of the equation, which is the subjective factor, where you go to see the movie. Did you have a great time at did you have a good time? Did you enjoy the movie? Yeah, I enjoyed the movie, but the movie sucked because of the plot thing, or because there was no rules. That's where I go and sit. Hold on. Okay, well, get your stick out of your butt and just chill for a second.
That stick, I just shoved that every day. Every day I shove that stick a couple more inches up.
This is why you're a prick.
Butt.
This is why you're a prick.
Recently, McCurdy's taken to calling me just like an overall prick, which I take pride in. I take pride in.
You do take pride in that. I did tell Charlie. It's like every interview if I ever do an interview and people ask me about Charlie, I'm just like, well, you know, he's a prick, but I love him.
Prick pride. I have prick pride.
He's a huge prick.
That's our new T-shirt. Is just me being like prick pride.
Prick pride. Huge prick.
But that's the whole thing, is that it's like, stop having an opinion about things. Yeah, my opinion on this
but then when I
movie
look
is
at your
that it
list,
is
but
just
here's the thing. I
passable.
look at the list and I'm like, okay, well then why did we put Pope's Exorcist above Magic Mike's Last Dance?
Because of
And you're
Russell Crowe making
was
movies,
the only
making
reason.
songs, and
It was literally the
fighting
only reason.
demons around the world. Yeah. Yeah, that's because, I mean, dude, who are you going to pick?
But I felt like that was the same
fresh
thing. It's just like,
a fresh approach on like a priest, right? Like an actual exorcist, or this young Farmiga just being like, oh no, we need to go here to like do something, you know. I don't even know, like, okay, I'm willing to concede that her character development was probably more significant in the first movie, which, as I said, I haven't seen. But in this movie, I don't know who she is or why I should give a fuck about her, or really anybody. Whereas Russell Crowe's character in The Pope's Exorcist is significantly more enjoyable than anybody in this movie, other than maybe Maurice. Like, Maurice was just like an adequate, likable character. But even then, there wasn't really anything that paid off with him.
For me, with Irene, it's more or less like she's told, oh, hey, by the way, you're going to go get this Valak person. And she's like, well, what about the father that was with me who was doing all the exorcism stuff? It's like, yeah, he died from polio, so it's going to be you. So you got to go. And she's like, God damn it. And then, of course, Storm Reed comes. I keep wanting to call her Stormy Reed. It's just Storm Reed. Yeah. Storm Reed's like, oh, I want to come too, because I need to be your sidekick character. And that was what I got out of that. So other than I just want to see a miracle, which at least I was like, okay, there's a vague thread of a thing, and I felt like that was when the movie just trying to shove too much stuff into the movie to make it work. So that's like, to me, the real things that had the problems with this movie. I think when you keep going down this road of like, I hate jump scares, that's like that's a you problem. That's not a me problem.
Jump scares are a tool. They're a tool. Okay. Here's the way I've expressed it. You're gonna talk.
Before. Just don't.
No,
talk,
listen. This is the way I've expressed it before.
Like you're talking to a crazy person.
This is the way I've expressed it before. It's like when a really amazing action movie is made, and then Michael Bay watches it, and in a very, again, this always gets me in trouble, but in a very autistic sense, Michael Bay goes, oh, because he's looking at the surface, right? He goes, oh, action movies are all about people chasing each other and explosions. So I'm going to make a movie that has really attractive chases and explosions.
Sure.
Completely undervaluing.
It's just over.
What he doesn't understand is the human connection underlying the explosions and the chases, where this movie is like a pathetic excuse to just have a bunch of jump scare set pieces, just like having an action movie with a bunch of chases where eventually you get bored because you're like, I don't care, because I don't know who's chasing whom and why I should give a shit. So jump scares, that's why I keep equating it to a roller coaster. If you want a roller coaster, go ahead and just go get on a roller coaster. But this is meaningless. I'll never see this movie again in my life, because what am I supposed to get out of it?
Well, you will actually. No, you will see it again, because at some point we'll have to do the Conjuring films. So
and I can't wait to shit on it a second time, because it's just like nothing. And that's what I mean. It's like it is an autistic take on what horror is. Oh, horror is just like a scary thing jumping out at you. Okay, yeah, that works on high school girls. Oh wait, no, it didn't, because they all got up and left me alone in the theater. So even they knew better. Even they knew, like, oh, this movie's just fucking boring.
Okay, I get it. You're a prick. Let's just move on.
What is the human connection?
Let's move on.
What is the human connection to this?
Here's the thing. I get it. You're a prick. The only thing I'll say, the thing I'll leave with, is I can see why Insidious the Red Door should be above. That's all I'll say. And that's where I think it should go, is right under Insidious the Red Door. Because you're just being a prick. You're just being a prick. No, you don't. You're just being a prick.
I want you.
Listen, you know what happens? You're just a prick. You're gonna poke everybody away from you for being
prick pride.
Like, that's all you're gonna do.
Prick pride.
You're just gonna poke everybody away from you from being a prick.
Dude, I
like, again, don't just because you
a
had a bad experience at the movie theater because a bunch of girls left, don't be like, yes, this movie's bad because of that. And because
no,
there's no rules.
no. I'm not
and
saying
I don't
it's
like
bad.
jump scares.
I'm saying my point
outta
is
here.
only
outta
accentuated by
here.
the fact that even a bunch of teenage girls got up and left. That's I'm not hanging my whole argument on that. I'm saying that
feels like it when you keep bringing it up.
in addition to me fucking just sitting there like, God,
Okay,
this
buddy.
sucks.
All
Even they got. I was
Yes.
like, girls, let's go to Steak and Shake. Take me
my
away.
God. Okay, just go ahead.
That's
and
what
put
we
it
used to
under
do back in the
Insidious
day.
Red
At
Door.
3 a.m., you'd leave a movie and you'd go to the local Steak and Shake and
When Steak and Shake was open that late. Yeah.
commiserate. Yeah.
That
Is that
fun
gone
back
now?
in
Is Steak and Shake
That
still
steak-
alive? Anyway,
Steak and
okay.
Shake
So you're
is
saying
holding by a
below.
thread.
You're saying
Holding by a
below.
thread. Here's why I put it below.
Red
Here's why I
Door.
would put it above.
But what about Demeter? What about Demeter?
Okay, here's why. Because Demeter, while there are certain things where I'm like, I was very interested in watching that one, and I was like, okay, this is like Aliens, but takes place in the 1800s. This is cool.
Yeah.
The thing that I really like, there's a couple of things that really took me out of the movie. One being the first big thing is just like the movie up front tells you this is from the book Dracula, and you're like, okay, and then on top of that, we already know what happens to the boat in the very beginning of the movie. So I'm just like, why do I care about any of this stuff that's going to happen? I know Dracula is going to come to the mainland. Like, make it a mystery as to what story this is, and let the people who know that it's a Dracula story to just sit back and watch the movie and let like the actual story unfold as it should. Whereas I think with this movie, The Nun 2 at least doesn't have this gap. Like, there is like, sure, in the Conjuring universe, you find out Maurice eventually something happens to him. But with this movie, even going in with like, haven't seen the first one in a while, I was like, okay, well, how did Valak come back? How did this? Like, I felt like this movie at least gave you a lot of questions that eventually you're trying to catch up and you're like, oh, okay. And there gives you a different set of characters to at least care about, that you're like, okay, it's this group of kids that live at this, at a boarding school. And like, that's where this is going to be set. And this is where the, all the horrors are going to come out. The things I will reiterate, I think this movie would have worked better if the boarding school they were at was run by a bunch of nuns, because then at least you could incorporate the nun stuff.
It would be
that
on
would have
theme.
that would have because they even mentioned early in the movie, they're like, it took the look of a nun because it was what's not the word, bastard. I'm brain fog. I want to say bastardized, something similar.
The devil
to it.
takes things that are holy and
and then
bastardizes them.
Bastardizes it, or whatever you want to call it. Like, that would have been okay. That would have worked because, again, you already have all these little girls. Like, yeah, I think Susan should have been another nun, and then maybe make Storm Reed another nun in this place instead of her being the sidekick character. Like, this, they could have combined the story a little bit more.
Let Farmiga show up halfway through, and she's like, "I've been through this before," and Storm Reed is already one of the teachers, and we don't have this confusion. Like, it is just confusing.
Made it a little more solid.
Yeah, it's like we're at like a nunnery, and it's like,
but it's not it's in the beginning. Are you talking about when they show?
We're at a nunnery, and
it should have
just been Maurice showing up at this boarding school and getting a job, but also being kind of weird and like getting in with these new characters. But instead it was like, I got the sense that it was beholden to the previous movie in a negative way.
And they had to, because in the previous movie, it's like they part ways, and then like, I think I don't even remember if that scene where they're at the train, if that was in the previous movie or not, but I think the movie does end where you find out that he's been possessed. So obviously something has come awry. You just don't know how it all plays in together. But I think the pieces are there, but at least it's a new story. And I know you were like harping on like, well, it's just a vague plot. I'm like, the vague plot, at least for me, it had me into the story. And I'm also like, I like the Conjuring movies, and I watched the previous Nun movies.
Same.
So I like the connectivity.
Where do you rank this in the Conjuring movies? Low?
No, I think it's in the middle. Because I haven't seen the Annabelle movies. That's the problem. I haven't seen half of them. So like,
same.
I've seen all the Conjuring movies, and I don't think and I'm not sure if it holds a candle to those films particularly, but I like this just as much as I probably liked The Nun. But I think the first one's probably just a little bit better. in some regards, but I think there's elements of this one that I like more about the Nun. So I'd have to go back, probably rewatch all of them, kind of give you a fresh take. I've never seen. I started the first Annabelle, and that one was garbage. Like I didn't even finish it. I was like, this story is stupid. And then I hear that the second two are huge improvements, and then I haven't seen The Curse, so I have no idea if that one's good, bad, ugly, whatever. So
Someday.
yeah.
We'll get
someday,
to someday.
We'll go through it. But I think really what it comes down to is the voyage, the last voyage of the Demeter just does like tells you too much up front, and then it doesn't give you enough to get excited about by the end of the movie. And then also the characters, I just never give two shits about anybody. Where at least this movie, it's like about a little girl and like this like kind of sweet innocent thing with her and Frenchie and Susan from Narnia, and then like I'm already on board with seeing like the Sister Irene because she's like doing the detective stuff, and I love that stuff in movies. So I'm like I'm way more onto the Nun than I like the Last Voyage. The Last Voyage was just like I was disappointed.
So we're already pretty far down the list, so I'm not going to put up too much of a fight. What I will say is, Demeter at least has something of a fresh tale. Even though I, in my quick review of that movie, I was like, ultimately it is scraping the bottom of the Dracula barrel, where it had potential to really be like, oh, this is like a fresh Dracula movie, but instead that ended up being cookie cutter as well, unfortunately.
It's just taking the plot, taking the similar plot to Alien and just
but like Dracula. Regardless of
yeah.
Alien or any other movie, it still is like, oh, this is an untold piece of Dracula that could be really well done. I would say both Demeter and The Nun 2 are cookie cutter, and I would say that The Nun 2 is more cookie cutter, and that is why I put it below Demeter. I'm not going to put up too much of a fight though, because I think both movies are pretty piss poor. But The Last Voyage of the Demeter at least has a like vaguely more original thing going on versus this is just another dark hallways, walking around in dark hallways jump scare movie that we've seen a million times. And then they add a pseudo Christianity element into it with the sacred relic. And then we hold it up at the end with the, like, go to hell, demon. But then at the same time, Demeter has that. My least favorite moment of that movie was the die, you devil. And then like she hit the mask to like felt like Dracula stopped killing what's his name. And yeah, then he just like pushed
well, yeah, and that's my
they both suck.
I get it, but I think my big point with The Last Voyage is that they're tied down to a story. They're tied down in what they can and can't do with that story. Whereas I think this movie sky's the limit, save for Frenchie. Like that's literally all.
I would give it that though. When I say things are random, there is a limiting principle in Demeter. Dracula is limited by his blood intake, and so Dracula actually they make a point at some point of saying that Dracula has to he's rationing us. He's rationing the blood on the ship. So there is a limiting factor there, and Dracula can't come out during the day. Whereas in this movie, Valak could pretty much just do whatever Valak wanted to do.
Yeah, but I've never I know you say that, but like when it comes to demons and stories, I like a little bit of ambiguity, as well as I like having a threat where you're not sure what you can and can't do with it. Like I know you want to keep everything to rules, but for me, like certain horror films, I feel like too many rules, and then it becomes a little silly. Like if you saw what was the movie with Ethan Hawke that came out? It's really creepy movie.
The Black Phone?
No, not that one's good.
I gotta watch that. I haven't seen it. This October, I'm gonna go nuts with.
Go see. I liked the Black Phone, but no, I'm thinking of the Shutter. Was it the Shutter? What was it, Shutter or something like that? Sinister. I'm thinking of Sinister. Sinister was one of these movies where they overdo the rules, and that's where I'm like, okay, this is kind of dumb. And then when they go to the second movie, they make it even worse because they're sticking to these rules that to me feel like hold on.
What does it have to do with these?
What it has to do?
You're saying too many rules?
Too many rules, I think, ruin movies.
Sure,
when I say that, I'm saying that in
I'm
regards to
saying
horror films.
I'm saying between Demeter and this movie
Yeah,
doesn't have
but I think
any
the
rules.
problem
It's
is
like
this movie. Yeah,
it
again,
could
the Demeter just
Valak
here,
can do anything.
regardless of rules, the problem is that I already know what's going to happen to Demeter right when I watch the movie. Whereas this, I don't know what's going to happen, and that's like a huge thing when you're
Yeah,
going to
but
go into
is
a
that a
movie.
you problem though? Because you
That
already
is
know Dracula.
no,
What
it's
about a
like
little kid
even
watching
anybody who goes into the
Demeter?
movie is gonna know it's not like that. Here's the thing: it wasn't because I knew the shipwrecks. It's not because I know I've read the book or whatever. That wasn't the thing. It's just one, they already tell you right ahead. It's like this is from the book Dracula, so that's Dracula from the book. It's Dracula, and the movie decides to be like, okay, we're going to show you the ship wrecked because that's how, in the order of the book, that's how it happened. So we're going to show that to you. So the fact that you already know that the voyage to the Demeter happens and nobody's found on board already leads you to believe, like, okay, everyone's going to die on this boat except for like we saved this one character. And that's where I'm like,
But
yeah,
can you give me a
that's where
hook?
I'm like, do
Can
I
you
give a
give
crap?
me a hook? Like I'm not gonna fight too hard, but I still think Demeter has a certain freshness to it that this movie just is cookie cutter.
Regardless of
What
any
is the hook?
freshness, I
Give me like a hook. Like Pope's Exorcist, it's like you have Russell Crowe. That is a good fucking hook. What is the hook for the Nun 2 to be
I
better
also
than
think
Demeter's vague freshness?
I think there's a little bit more things that are memorable to me in this movie than there are in Demeter. And I know, like, you're gonna say, "Oh, but you're
No,
just
no,
saying
no.
like
What are they? What are they?
like
Regardless
I
of my
think the
reaction,
magazine,
what are
like
they?
for instance, so, like I
Magazine was
think
good.
the magazine was good. I liked
Yeah.
the magazine. I also liked. Hold on. I also liked. Um. Okay. Actually, there's a couple things, right? So I liked the magazine. I liked the intro where the boy and the soccer ball and all that. It might seem like it's been done before, but I actually liked how I didn't expect the wine to crack, and then it gets everywhere. He goes to the kid. Like I liked all of that with Valak. I liked that stuff. The other thing that I liked about this movie a little bit more is that at least at the end of the movie, they're not because remember when we talked about Voyage of the Meter and we were like they don't know how to kill the thing, so they're just like I don't know how we kill it. Like they were trying to figure it out and they were just like that would have been an opportunity for like the Holy Man or some character to say like the only way to get rid of these things, because like even in the book Dracula, like Van Helsing knows how to kill Dracula, kills his vampire, and then for some reason the vampire bride, or the woman from the village who's been taken from as a snack, essentially, she doesn't know. Like you're telling me like this woman who's lived in this village for hundreds of years, they don't know how to kill it, but then somehow Van Helsing knows how to kill vampires. Like, and I know Van Helsing's not in the story, but I'm just like, so you're just putting that in there because it's kind of fun, wink wink, but at the same time it's like, yeah, but you put that crap in there so then like when you get to the end of the story, the characters have a goal, a rule for something for them to figure out how they're going to kill this vampire.
I have a hook. I have a hook for you, McCurdy.
In this movie, I think that in the Nun 2 at least, they're like, hey, we got to get these eyes, the eyes of Lucy, and they're like, well, it'll make him more powerful, yes, but that's the only thing we have to get him to kill him. So like they have some kind of plan or something that they have to put in motion to stop the demon at the end. And I also like I like the twist of how they end up killing him with the wine, where they're like, well, wait, we're surrounded by the thing that takes in the blood, and they do set that up.
Made good on an earlier scene,
and they do set that up.
You want to hear my
that
stupid
was just
hook?
in the back of your mind.
Here's my stupid hook.
What's your stupid hook?
My stupid hook is that Demeter took itself super, super, super seriously and was just like kind of stupid. I laughed quite a bit in this movie. Like certain kills, just
I don't. And here's the thing,
I laughed.
They
laughed so
intended
hard.
it to be a little funny.
Maybe, but like when okay, I already said how. Like for example,
like
when the priest in the beginning,
and you're like, yes.
but like the priest in the beginning, he gets lifted up into the air and then he just explodes in fire, and I was laughing. And then like when they first see Maurice, and Formiga, what's the main nun's name again? You said her name. What's her name?
Saint Irene.
Irene.
Or, sister Irene.
Irene. She's like, get away from them. And he's like, what are you talking about? She's like, you're possessed. And then he starts beating the shit out of the nuns. Like, I was just like, there's nothing funnier than a huge guy picking up and body slamming a nun. So like, I'm like laughing then. And then when the boarding school principal is walking around in the dark and there's like this, like a dead.
I liked the
dead
principal
altar
stuff. That was the
boy
shit. I liked
beating
all that.
her up with one of the like the Catholic smoker.
I
was like
that.
repeatedly laughing throughout the movie, like just laughing. You know,
I liked
and
that whole that was the other thing. I liked that whole set piece. I liked how it was set up. I know you thought it was funny, but like I thought that the way that in which that they did a lot of work to set that up, and I really liked that set
my
piece
raw
as well.
enjoyment
there's just a lot more I thought was memorable in that movie than this
my
one.
raw enjoyment and maybe an unintentional way is enough for me to put it above Demeter, where Demeter was just kind of like it was taking itself super seriously without really challenging you story wise. So that's my hook. That's where I will put the Nunnery to.
And we're saying Insidious is above Red Door because there's like this father-son passing on the sins of the father story that really there's not really much as far as the like when we distinguish story and plot, like there's a plot to this movie. There's not really that much of a story other than a very kind of vague like have faith and things like that and believing in miracles, and it's kind of just very loose.
I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna put it just above Demeter.
Cool.
Locking it in.
You're still a pick, so.
Also,
Also, you got to make the list smaller because, like,
yeah,
you're also
I'm about to do it. I gotta. Boop. There, perfection. Okay, we are locked in. The Nun 2 is now at position 36, just above The Last Voyage of the Demeter, below Insidious: The Red Door, which is. As you've pointed out, you've been very frustrated that we have too many horror movies on this list. The only frustration I have with horror movies is that most of them are trite garbage.
There's a lot.
Like
Here's the thing.
And Beau Is Afraid, which are fantastic. So, Louise B.
Yeah, when I pull
100. All right.
100%.
We have
when I brought up the
Louise, tell us about yourself. Who are you? Where do you live? And who are you? And what's your social security number? No, leave that last part out. But just tell us about yourself. Because
it's very important that he knows this.
Now with us, we want to know about you. But otherwise, agrees that we're at position 36 of 41.
Where is the? Hold on, I'm trying to pull this up. So yeah, the schedule as this. The schedule. So we saw the Nun 2 next week. A Haunting in Venice. Which isn't a horror movie. Like it's saying it was a horror. It's saying it's a horror movie, but it's a Hercule Poirot movie. It's part of the Oriental Express franchise of films that are vaguely loose tied together, kind of like Glass Onion and Knives Out. But this one is they lean into the horror stuff because it's the title and it seems like it's supposed to be spooky. So maybe when we see it, they're going to put that in the front and then we'll find out like, oh, it's not as supernatural as you think it is, unless that's what they do with the movie or the trailer is really misleading. Who knows?
It's like The Haunting where it just ends up being some guy or whatever versus being something supernatural.
I just watched. Are you talking about the 90s movie or are you talking about the original movie?
Isn't the Vincent Price one? Doesn't it just end up being
that's like Haunting
Price?
at Hill House? That's the Haunting at no, that is a Haunting. Sorry, there are two movies. There's actually a bunch.
It's a mess.
It's not that one. It's not one that one. Yeah, that one's more of like there's real world. There's a non-supernatural element to it. There's another one called The Haunting. And that one was based off the book A Haunting at Hill House. The other one you're thinking of is something on the House on the Hill or Haunting on the House on the Hill.
Haunting on Hill House. Yeah. There's a whole bunch.
Slightly different. But anyway, yeah, I think that's what it is. But yeah, I'm looking at the list and I'm like, we got Expendables, we got The Creator, Exorcist, and then there's a week where it's like nothing comes out because it's the 13th. And so we could probably do some catch up. And then we've got Killers of the Flower Moon, which will be at least a
Scorsese.
something to looking forward to. Five Nights at Freddy's, another horror film, but I kind of like I know it's based off a video game thing, but I'm kind of curious about it. What do we have? What Happened Later or Catch Up? We got The Marvels or The Holdovers. The Holdovers looks fun. Hunger Games prequel. Napoleon, which is another one we should be looking forward to, the Ridley Scott movie.
Yeah.
And then The Bike Riders, which has got Austin, the guy who played Elvis, is in that one. And we're in December now, and then we've got Poor Things. Magazine Dreams is also another one I put on there. That was the Jonathan Majors movie, because we talked about Jonathan Majors. And then when it gets down to Christmas, we might just be going to the movies and doing back to back to back of these. But we got December 15th, we got Wonka. And then December 22nd, which is very close to Christmas, we've got Aquaman The Last Kingdom, but there's also The Iron Claw and Ferrari and The Color Purple. So there's a bunch of movies that are coming out Christmas. So we might
If
just
Wonka isn't good, I'm gonna be pissed. I'm gonna be
it's gonna be terrible. Why do you think Wonka's gonna be good? I just think it's just gonna be a thing.
I don't know anything about it. I'm just saying that for me it's high stakes, because one of my all-time favorite movies ever is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So
the original, right?
Yeah.
The original one. So yeah, that's
don't ruin my childhood. No, I'm not in that camp. I'm not.
But yeah, no, I was gonna say that in this current environment of film, I will say, one, we could have watched My Big Fat Greek Wedding, but I think most people wanted to see this one. Two, most theaters now these days are just like, it's when it comes to the movie theaters, it's either it's a big production action film, like a superhero movie, or it's these schlocky horror films. Like there's just a bunch of them. And so I don't know. It's just weird after the end of this year. I'm like, there are a lot of horror movies that come out and I didn't know about them. I'm just like, oh, okay. Because they're cheap to do. Some of them are good. Some of them are not so good.
Who are we toasting to? I don't even remember because I don't care.
I put the possessor of guys possessed in this whole movie, and that is the actor who plays Maurice.
Okay, what's his name? He was the only likable character in the whole damn movie, but
I liked all the characters. I didn't hate any of these characters in this movie. I wasn't, but I didn't like love them. Jonas Bloquet. Jonas Bloquet.
Like bouquet? How do you spell it?
Bloquet.
Okay, wait, no, what's his first name? What's his first name? Jonas?
Jonas.
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 Jonas, right?
Thanks for all you've shown us.
Okay.
And this is how we feel.
I don't know who you are. You were likable in this movie, and we scraped the bottom of the barrel to come up with you being our toast. Wait, what is this screenshot? What is that? Is that from The Nun 1?
So the first one with the actually they're both from The Nun 1. The first one with him and the thing, that's early in The Nun 1, and then the last one, that's like the last bit in the end of the first one that kind of ties the Nun back to the first Conjuring movie.
Okay.
So I'm under the assumption that somehow, because they're doing this last one, I do wonder if this last movie is going to go full circle, because they kind of do set up in the second film that Ed Warren's going to get killed or die from the Nun, and it's prophesized. And so I do wonder if they're going to go like full circle, and it's going to circle back to this. He's going to come back to the next one, because even though I'm like, wait, this movie takes place in the 50s, it's like, yeah, but from the 50s to the 80s is only 30 years. So like, I don't know how badly they need to do age up makeup between these characters.
Yeah. Might be cool, but in like just trying to figure out who is the toast of this movie, it's this guy who I can understand why a 9-year-old girl would have a crush on you, dude, because you're cool. That's it. That's all I got. So
that's all he's got.
Got anything else, McCurdy?
No, I just thought generally did a great job, and I liked this movie more than you, and that's all I gotta say. I had a fun time. Right, I had a fun time at the movies. That's all that matters to me.
Yeah. Okay. To you, Jonas.
At times.
I hope you have a great life, Jonas. I hope you escape the devil and you like don't die ever. Cheers.
Cheers.